Could former UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson become the next president of the United States? That would be quite a feat to be the leader of two different countries. And yet the suggestion by some in Britain that he could become the next US president not only misunderstands how dual citizenship works, but misunderstands how expatriation works. I'm going to share the story with you. I wanted to share with you an article from a website called National World. I believe this is in the UK. And they ask, could Boris Johnson theoretically run for US president? Former UK Prime Minister's dual citizenship explained. I'm going to cover the US political situation, which is misunderstood, as well as the dual citizenship and Boris Johnson's individual situation. This is an example of folks not understanding how second citizenship and basically the whole nomad capitalist lifestyle works. I'm Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist, and I think I'm qualified to talk on this issue. We've helped over the last decade over 1,000 high and ultra high net worth individuals legally reduce their taxes overseas, get dual citizenship to increase their freedom, and expand their opportunities all over the world. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. So National World says it may seem fanciful, but could the New York-born former British Prime Minister now set his sights on the White House? The idea here basically is that since Boris Johnson was eventually out of the running to become UK Prime Minister again following Liz Truss, that, hey, maybe he could take his talents to Washington because he was born in New York. He spent the first 5 years of his life in the United States, and that makes him a US citizen. If you're born in the United States, Canada, pretty much any country in the Americas, with a few exceptions, you are a citizen, what's called a citizen by soil. And so when I chose to depart the US for good, if you look at the final certificate, it says, had citizenship by virtue of birth in the United States. Not the fact that my parents were American. That's what would happen if you were to become British. Unless your parents were stateless, I suppose. To become British, you need to be born to British parents, whether that's in the UK or somewhere else. Where you're born isn't really the issue. It's more of your blood. And that's a different concept in the New World. And so he was able to get British citizenship from his parents because it doesn't matter where you're born if you have parents, generally speaking, but also have US citizenship. And he spent the first 5 years of his life in New York. The problem that posed for Boris Johnson is that then, being a US citizen, you are required to pay taxes on your worldwide income. I don't know his tax situation, but the fact that in the 2010s, he sold a property, his primary home in the UK, that wouldn't have been taxed in the UK. And yet the US said, well, wait a second, that was your primary home. You've exceeded any exemption, and so you need to pay us tax on that. And he protested. They said, well, this is ridiculous. I don't live in your country. They said, yeah, that's great. You're a US citizen. You don't have to live here. We tax you. Now, there is a treaty with the UK, but okay, the UK wasn't taxing it in this case. And so he had to pay, and did he eventually pay? I think it's surmised that he did eventually pay the IRS. And then he showed up in the Federal Register as someone who renounced his citizenship in the mid-2010s. And so he had to renounce US citizenship to stop being taxed. Ostensibly, he was paying enough tax, and he used the treaty in the UK to where, I don't know if he ever filed tax returns in the US. I mean, generally speaking, if you're a US citizen living overseas, you need to be in US tax compliance. This is one thing that we connect people with, CPAs and lawyers that we've vetted and that I've worked with myself in some cases, to make sure you are in international tax compliance. Because if you are thinking of going offshore and you're going to use your domestic tax preparer, they don't know about offshore. And I've heard about all kinds of different mistakes that these accountants in the US make because they don't understand how it works internationally. You can go overseas, you can legally reduce your taxes, even though you're an American and you have this tax obligation. If you're a business owner, for example, you can legally reduce your taxes, sometimes even eliminate them as an American, but you have to know what you're getting into. And when it comes to things like capital gains, that's going to be a dicier situation. So that's Boris Johnson's situation. So I've kind of given away the plot here, but let's go back to this article. Mr. Johnson was born in the United States. For a man who wanted to be king of the world, that superpower offers the next best thing, the most powerful political office in the world, that of U.S. president. To qualify for being so, you have to be a natural-born citizen of the USA, which has, over the centuries, been taken to mean people born in the 50 states. Not necessarily true. So another misconception. John McCain, who ran for president in 2008, was born in Panama, but was born to Americans. They were working for the U.S., is my understanding. And so the idea of natural-born citizen was pretty clearly, in his case, I think even Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama said, yeah, he's a natural-born citizen. He was born as an American. He wasn't naturalized. He was born to American parents. Therefore, he was, when naturally born, an American, even though he was born overseas. Obviously, if you are the child of diplomats, you're not getting citizenship of the soil, and you're getting your parents' citizenship. And so, that may be a different issue. But you don't have to necessarily be born in the 50 states. Ted Cruz, who ran in 2016 for president, there was some debate because he was born in Canada, and therefore he was Canadian. He renounced that Canadian citizenship the same way Michelle Bachmann renounced Swiss citizenship in 2012 as kind of a political statement. But Ted Cruz being born in Canada, as much as Donald Trump mentioned it's an issue, he was still born, that I believe was an American. He was not naturalized. And so that's inaccurate. But it says, top American political figures, presidential advisor Henry Kissinger, ex-governor of California Arnold Schwarzenegger could never be president. They were naturalized, born in Germany, later in Austria. Even though they became dual citizens, you have to be born in the United States. This brings up a number of questions. If you were someone, let's say, I've surmised, like what if you renounced your citizenship? You were born in the United States, you were a U.S. citizen, you renounced it, you subsequently got a green card somehow, went back, renaturalized. Are you a natural born citizen? Obviously, nobody would vote for you because for political reasons, but could that work? Boris Johnson, however, what they're missing here, gave up his U.S. citizenship. And so the fact that he was born there, he's not a U.S. citizen anymore. And so therefore, he can't run. He certainly was a natural born citizen of the United States, but unless he tests my hypothesis of going back and doing the EB-5 green card program through investment or something like that, and then living in the country and paying taxes and all that, then he is not able to run because you actually have to be a citizen to run. So the article continues that Mr. Johnson's case, the notion of becoming president, is not entirely fanciful. He is better known in the U.S. Than any contemporary British politician, but he does have significant name recognition. That Tucker Carlson, for example, can refer to him by name without elaborating much on who he is. And it just kind of goes on and on and on, and talking about how the biggest issue that Boris Johnson would face is his residence, to where you have to live in the United States for more than 14 years, and that's the issue. Again, the issue is that Boris Johnson is no longer a U.S. citizen. And so you have to be a citizen to run. Could Boris Johnson settle, as they suggest also? Could he resettle to build up this 14 years of residence? He would need to get a green card, let's say by making an investment through EB-5. He would need to invest some at-risk capital to get an E2 visa, and then he could go and live there. But E2 is a non-resident visa. So he could get any number of different residence permits. He could certainly be an exceptional talent in something, get an O1 visa. We've had clients who've had O1s, who've had EB-5, who've had E2, who've had green cards. So you can certainly build up residence in the United States, but once you've renounced citizenship, you are generally out. So the misconceptions here are that somehow a former citizen can run for president. The misconceptions are that just because you are living in the UK or living overseas, if you're born in the United States, you're a taxpayer, and that's going to follow you until you cancel it. So a number of misunderstandings. I mean, certainly dual citizenship, you could be the leader of one country. There's even a few countries where you don't have to be born there. I believe Armenia, for example, is one where you don't have to be natural born Armenian. If you're naturalized Armenian, I believe you can run for president, which is not really the main job. The president of Armenia actually was founded to have citizenship of Cinncinatus by investment. And so you would have to renounce your other citizenships in this case as being a naturalized Armenian, and that was his issue, that he obtained this citizenship too close to becoming president. But that's a rare example of a country where you can actually come in as a naturalized citizen. Dual citizenship, obviously politicians in countries like the United States have determined that they should not have this, whether it's Michelle Bachmann, Ted Cruz, etc., if they want to if they want to be a credible political candidate. On the other hand, Dr. Oz, for example, who ran for Senate, had U.S. and Turkish citizenship, and that was a question that came up, particularly because people frowned more upon Turkey than they might have Canada or Switzerland or what have you. John McCain, I don't believe, was eligible for Panamanian citizenship because he was born, I think, on a U.S. base, and so that was probably not counted as part of the territory. And so anyway, I mean, multiple different situations of who could have dual citizenship. We've talked about how Donald Trump maybe have been able to qualify for British citizenship through his mother. But can you go to another country and become a citizen? The answer for Boris Johnson is a very clear no. Hasn't lived in the U.S., isn't a U.S. citizen anymore, and actually had to leave because of misunderstanding this idea of U.S. extraterritorial taxation.